family friend very reluctantly told me about a story about her brother who went to university in Pakistan in the 70s. He had one roommate who the family was very close to. They had been studying together for years. They had also been living in a dorm together for years. They came home late one night, and my family's friend's brother asked his friend to turn off the light by the door because he was tired and wanted to go directly to bed. His roommate replied, "If you make me turn off that light, we will no longer be friends." To which my family's friend's brother laughed and said, "Come on, man, just turn off the light." They went back and forth for a while, his roommate resisting and him continuing to ask him to turn off the light. Things got interesting. His roommate's arm stretched from across the room and flipped off the light, and my family's friend's brother passed out from fear. The next morning, all his belongings were gone, and so was he. He was inhuman and seemed to be a jinn. Our neighbor's son was a small plane pilot. He also had red hair. One day he went off for a flight with his little brother, also a redhead. They never came back. Their mother was distraught. She tried everything to get back her sons. Finally, after years of searching, she found some Pakistani mulana who said he could find the boys. He was shipped in from Pakistan to Kenya, where I was only 7 years old. The mulana took a large plate of water and began to scry. He summoned jinn to tell him the location of the neighbor's boys. But before he said anything, he asked for a girl and a boy, age of 7, to look and tell what they saw. The only boy and girl were me and my friend Sonny. Apparently we both went into a trance of some sorts, and said the same thing, that we saw a down plane and a pale boy with red dreadlocks walking amongst many men, also with dreadlocks. He was smoking a pipe and was mostly naked. The plane was near a river in a grove of trees high on a big mountain. The family used the last of their money to gather a search team and the resources so that they could go to Aberdair Mountains. They not only found a plane, but also found a younger boy with dreadlocks, living amongst the last of the Mau Mau. By the time they ran out of money to pay the mulana, and it was said that he cursed them. They said terrible things about him. 5 years later, the rescue boy was found dead with his mouth stuffed with money. He was an addict and got in with the wrong people. 10 years later, at 16, I became very ill. I nearly died. I was almost comatose for 2 days. When I woke up, Sonny, my best friend, had suddenly died from an asthma attack. We had both been in perfect health on Friday, 3 days earlier. Later on, I heard a rumor that my father had finally paid the mulana off for his scrying. His scrying worked to save my life. But the jinn had claimed all they had seen. Before you say what nonsense, my father was a doctor and very unreligious, but even he realized that something unnatural was afoot. My mother's family were very superstitious and spent days consulting and sacrificing things to make sure the jinn left us alone. And various members of our family have been plagued with things that could not be explained by mental illness or straight-up jinn possession, especially since they often resolve with no meds and religious intervention. I'm a medical professional myself, and very unreligious, but I have seen some things that defies logic. A family was living in a rented place for most of their life abroad. Turns out, there used to live a jinn there as well. The jinn wasn't looking to harm anyone, but it had some conditions. Like, whenever you cook any sweet dish, keep a portion of it in a bowl in an empty room. Leave it like that for a few minutes, and the bowl would be empty. No oud, for some reason, and jinn didn't want to leave. Let me explain the last one. I can't train other humans to live with me, the jinn said, something along these lines. Every few years, the family would start looking for a new place, in secret, to make sure the jinn doesn't find out about it. Every single time the new owners would say yes, and a few days later something or other would happen, and they'll lose the contract. I told you, you'll either go back to your country or live with me until that happens. When I was younger, my mom had an experience. She was in charge of my mosque along with someone else, and she was opening without him. She was running late and ended up taking a wrong turn. The mosque was in a bad area. Think lots of shootings, gangs, drugs, the worst, etc. Anyway, it was also near a deserted highway. This was before everyone had GPS, and her old phone was out of battery. As she was driving, she noticed someone was following her for a while. She stopped thinking that she was going to die. She was going to regardless. She started saying some prayers and pulled over. The car stopped in front of her. Some Caucasian guy, who was very bright, got out of the car and basically motioned at my mom, then got back in the car. My mom followed. She doesn't know why she did, but it was just instinct, she said, and he led her to the mosque. She went out to thank him, but there was no one there. No sight of a car, no man, no guy, nothing. I met a Pakistani man that told me he saw a ghost city in the wilderness. I'm not sure if ghosts and jinn are the same thing, but he was talking about supernatural beings that live apart from man. In essence, he saw a massive city for a few moments, and then it vanished. In my rural town, there's talk of a seven-headed jinn. I've never encountered it myself, but this man that lived in a house ran away in the dead of the night because he saw it. The house has been abandoned ever since. One story I heard, a father believed his son was possessed by a jinn, but his son didn't respect him or wasn't that holy, so he did not call a person to exorcise him. Another one I heard from a person is that they were walking near midnight and went past a park. There was some individuals that were beckoning the person with one-hand gestures to come enter the park. They were wearing clothing which basically no one wears at all. It is also believed by people that jinns are more active at night. One time, my sister and I and some neighbors went to the cemetery where jinns hang out late at night because, well, why not? And it was dead. There were two walkways there, one that led further into the graveyard and one closer to our car, and we chose the one that was longer before we turned to the path. A sudden stick or something just snapped, and an unfamiliar noise was made. It sounded like something was whispering and growling at the same time, but it didn't come from any animal or person. and we couldn't spot any figure besides the tombstones. Of course we panicked and took the other way back into the car and drove the hell out of there. When we got home and told our mom, she yelled at us for going to the graveyard at night and told us that it means the jinn was warning us not to take that path because sometimes they can be very nice creatures if they want to, and they were trying to protect us from something according to her. Jinns are not always demons. I always say that to this day. Me and my sister used to go on a walk around 12 to 1 a.m. every day with our uncle. I was around 7, she was about 11 at this time, and my uncle, well, he was around 25. And there was a shortcut to return home, but the shortcut was through the graveyard. Weeks passed. Nothing creepy happened until one day we went for a walk again, and we heard footsteps approaching, and I freaked out. So I started running, and my uncle started laughing for me being a little wimp. And the weird thing, there were cows grazing in the graveyard that night. Never happened before, and they started making noises, and one of them started running, and then we all freaked out. Not gonna lie, I never went for a walk again because of that night. My school used to be a hospital years before. It was after school, and it was just me and about 3 more kids. Suddenly we started to hear loud babies crying, voices, literally. No one besides us was in the school. We ran the hell out of there. In my village, there was a tree where a couple of kids would either faint or, in one instance, a jinn would possess the body. I remember being there, and the kid, about 10 years old, sounded really hoarse and started grabbing stuff and throwing it at people. He saw the sky and said he wanted to go where the sky touched the earth. When people went to his house, he said, "So, have you come to see what I am?" A house in my village is haunted. Everyone knows it, including my family, but they say the jinns never bother them. Doors open and close by themselves, and lights turn off and on. There were rumors of jinn near the place before the house was built. I was traveling to an old miner's village with my engaged girlfriend. I played the guitar and wanted to meet with my friend Max from my old school band. He spoke very softly, and it was comforting to hear his voice after so long of not speaking to him. As we spoke about the weather and how the rain had fell onto this village in the afternoon, he then told me about a place that was up on a hill. It was the old town hall. He said that I was invited to come. All the members of the village would have a meeting there. I was more than excited to meet some new people, as I booked a hotel here for a couple months, and it would be great to get to know the fellow members of the town as well as old schoolmates. Max told me that he had planned a couple things that would do in town, and one was going down an old mine shaft. Another was taking a small boat on a river. Max was wearing a tuxedo and took me to a bar. We drank wine and spoke about the women in our lives. You still with Mary? Oh, we're actually engaged. Oh, really? You see, outside news doesn't get to this town often. You never really left. It never occurred to me. I already love the river and mountains around here. I always wanted to leave this place. That's not surprising, after all that happened. Well, it was unfortunate, but the memories here are still laid in this place. It was always a special town for me, even after all that happened. Greg, your father was... It's alright, Max. Thank you, but let's move on to something else. Greg, you're right. At least the wine has arrived. Later that evening, we walked down the street. The lights flickered and the rain was pouring, but Max had an umbrella. We're having a gathering at the town hall tomorrow. With all the old families from the town? Yeah. I know you would be uncomfortable, but I really think it would be great if you joined us. I'm a bit busy tomorrow. Mary is taking us up the mountain through the snow. It will only take a couple hours, and Mary can come too. There will be music and dinner. What should I wear? The suit that you are wearing will be fine. I talked to Mary about this place, and she was keen to meet with my old mates from school because she has never met them. We walked into the town hall. Our coats are taken from us and out on the side. Everyone is sitting at the table. We took the middle spot. I spotted Max and told him, "Looks amazing. Really looks great, man." Only the finest for our guest. I started eating the first meal, cutting it with a knife before a bell rang. Welcome, one and all, especially our new guest, Greg and Mary. My name is James. Let's thank John for our food. The old man bows to him, and the chef bows back as well, and we all clapped. And now, each month we play a game. Those who wish not to play, raise your hands. Once the game starts, it cannot stop. No one raised their hand, so the game began. Let the games begin. Greg, you can start as you are our guest. I replied, "What do I have to do?" Just pick a person. Okay, I picked Max. Oh, great pick. Max, please step outside. The old man spoke again. Max, nominate someone. Well, I have to repay the favor. I pick Greg. Very well. Greg, put your head up and come to front. My head came up and I saw a person blindfolded and gagged tied to a chair. There was a box on the table. I walked up to the front and next to the blindfolded person in a chair with ropes around the person, the old man said, "Open the box." I looked inside. At that moment, I panicked and said, "Sorry guys, no, I have to go. Oh, but you can't leave so soon, we just started. It's my bad, it's late, and we really have to go. Mary, put your head up. Greg, what's happening? We have to go, Mary. We have to get to the ski resort tomorrow. Sorry, Max." The old man rang the bell, then spoke. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. Once the game starts, it must be finished." I grabbed Mary and we walked to the door, but it was locked. "Let me out." "Can't do it. Sorry." "Do it or I'll smash this vase on this man's head." "Go ahead." "Very well." As I hit his head, it was a mannequin. They were so lifelike that I didn't even notice. The old man spoke again. "The only way to leave is to shoot the gun to kill one person in this room." Max walked up to the old man. They then walked out, but opening the key to the door. We ran up, but he closed it before we could do anything. A couple seconds later, we punched into the wall, only to see that metal lined the wall and the doors were also made from the same material. We spoke to the person who was tied up and cut his ropes. Hey, can you hear us? Help me. Help me. How did you get here? My name is Richard. I was traveling with my aunt when a limo swerved in front, almost crashing into a car on the side of the road. I got in front of him and tried slowing him down, but he wouldn't stop. Then he just stopped, so I did too. I pulled over. I got out of my car and walked up to him in the limo. Then I was attacked with a needle and a guy with the pig mask. It took a long time, but after almost a week and a half, me and Mary decided to plan to use the gun. We got it and pointed it at the man. He begged, "Please, please." Why shouldn't we? They said it's the only way out. I want to see my son again. I beg you, please. Hungry and out of options, I pulled the trigger. It fired. Then I heard laughing. Everyone from the dinner came in. "You won $100,000, Max said. We have been watching 3 couples try this experiment, none of which did it as fast as you guys. This is a live stream on the dark web, and you guys get the prize pool. Well done." The old man said, "To keep the prize and your lives, you must never speak of this again." I have a friend who isn't Muslim, but I believe he's Hindi. There's an entire prayer room in his house with a bunch of statues, and when I asked about it, he said it's where the spirits stay. Now there's a swing in his living room. We were the only ones in the house, and we leave his room, and it's swinging full speed. He just writes it off as that's the spirits. Man, wildest thing I've ever seen. I have an auntie. Let's just call her Auntie Fawzia. She had been married for a long time and had always wanted a baby, but was unable to conceive. She always used to pray 5 times a day. One sunny day, she was at my grandmother's house in the prayer room. She was a pious lady, and no one thought to check on her. 2 hours later, we heard screams like as if there was an animal in there. We all ran to check, and there was Auntie Fawzia, covered in crap. She had been crapping and had smeared her poop all over the walls and the Qurans in the prayer room. This woman had never shown any signs of mental illness before that day. My grandmother asked her what she was doing. She turned around and said in Punjabi, and in a voice that was not hers, "I have eaten Fawzia. I have eaten her children, and I am going to eat all of you." My grandma locked the room from the outside and snatched the kids up and told us to run to my uncle's work and tell him that Auntie Fawzia was very ill and had pooped all over the prayer room, and to bring a malim or mulana. She was possessed for like 5 days. The whole town was aware. They even brought a priest from the Catholic Church. On the 5th day, the Malims sent for a big sheikh from Yemen. Took him 3 more days on a cow from Kenya. Meanwhile, Auntie Fawzia had to be tied up with ropes to keep her from defiling everything in sight. Us kids were not allowed to see her, but we'd often look through the windows. I was about 12. The sheikh from Yemen was called Sheikh Rocket. He asked for a white chicken, a white goat, an egg, and a block of wet concrete. He prayed, exorcised her, killed the chicken and the goat, and somehow coaxed the jinn, demon, whatever it was, into an egg. He put the egg in the wet concrete block and told my uncle to throw it in the Lake Victoria. Once the jinn was in the egg, she immediately fell into a stupor and woke up the next day perfectly normal. She also had a kid and is now even a grandmother. Everyone says it was a jinn, sent by a specific person to harm our family. I think she just ran amok. But what do I know? I heard this story from a Muslim friend of mine. There used to be an old man who would clean up the graves and the buried in the village town. It was a poor village, so the graves were dirty and the grass around them would grow long and thin. On this one occasion, he arrived at the grave of a relative and began working on it. When some hours passed, he began to get tired. When he glanced up, he saw that the sun had long set and he had lost track of time. As he was getting up to leave, he sees something in mostly black moving very quickly nearby. He feels the darkness and has no idea of his surroundings. As the figure approaches closer with fear, he closes his eyes and starts to recite prayer. When he opens them, whatever was there before disappears.
My husband, Derek, has no sight whatsoever, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Weirdly, I'd say it actually strengthens our relationship. There's things about us that are just way too adorable and cute. Like sometimes, I'll sneak into a room and gently touch his head and massage his shoulders, and he'll immediately brighten up. What keeps things spicy is that he's got insanely good hearing. The slightest floorboard creak perks his ears up. Then he'll crane his head in my direction and say, "Morning, Charlotte." I always get the better of him, though. I'll soundlessly sneak up on him and slide my hands around his waist from behind. A little surprise attack hug. He always sulks whenever I catch him off guard like that. It's adorable. He's got a wicked sense of humor, too. Just last week, while reading the paper, I said, "Did you see another kid's gone missing? That's the third one this year." "I didn't see anything," he replied, deadpan. The major bonus, though, and the thing that torpedoed a few of my previous relationships, is how there's no need to dress up every day. Now, take this morning, for example. Our country is experiencing a heat wave right now, and I'd get a tan from standing directly beneath the 60-watt bulb for too long. So you can imagine what it's been like. When I rolled out of bed and pulled the curtains apart, I figured, to hell with it, let's go all nature. As usual, my husband woke up a little later and shuffled into the kitchen, fawning for his morning cuddle. Ugh. Where are you?" he called out, a grin spreading across his face. "Do you want to play Marco Polo?" A game of Marco Polo usually, and by usually, I mean always, ends with us horizontal on the bed, on the lounge sofa, the dining room table, or bathtub. But the idea of steaming up the windows when I was already sweating buckets and hadn't eaten breakfast yet, no thank you. Unencumbered by my human suit. That's right, I said it. Suit. I silently scurried up the wall, onto the ceiling, careful to keep my coffee upright, angled vertically, and the entire time 3 of my arms clung to the roof. a bulging thorax dangling mere inches above Derek's skull. After a few seconds of feeling his way around the central island, he wandered into the hallway defeated, and I crept toward the corner where I encased the young boy from the newspaper in a web. I munched on what remained of his left thigh. His jaundiced face twitched wildly. He wasn't quite dead. My toxins kept him sedated enough that he couldn't make any noise or wiggle free. After breakfast, I scurried along the ceiling into the bedroom, slipped on my human skin suit, found Derek in the lounge, dropped directly behind him, and then encased his waist from behind. He spun around. How do you always sneak up on me like that?
I've been babysitting people around my neighborhood for years now, but after I moved to a new place, it took me a while for me to find a place to babysit. I've always loved babysitting, but I don't think I'll ever do it again. After what happened, the parents want to go on a date night. Nothing too bad, I've done that before. They had some pretty average results except for one. Don't go in the basement. I figured, hey, maybe there's something dangerous down there. Or hey, maybe that's your storage and they don't want me to get hurt. Maybe they keep valuables down there and they don't want them to get stolen. I didn't think their son would end up running down there, but of course, I had to follow him. The smell got to me immediately. I almost started puking, but strangely, he didn't seem fazed by it, and he started giggling. I understood why I wasn't allowed to go down here. When I saw the blood, yeah, and I saw pieces. One of them was the head of a young woman who seemed to be even younger than me. One seemed to be an older man's arm, hairy, white. I picked up that kid and ran out of that house with him in my arms. I told the police, but by the time the stinking was over and the police had searched everything, they found all the bodies, including the ones in the basement and backyard. The parents didn't come back. They never came back. I don't need to babysit anymore now. I'm the one who needs a babysitter since I didn't have the heart to give up that cute little boy. But sometimes he asks me weird questions like, "Where's the basement?" Ignacio Rojas was 72 when the doctor told him he was dying. He had 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and a long-term starring role on the soap opera filmed live before a studio audience, Passionista as Don Ignacio, the poor stable boy who had risen to become dictator of a fictional banana republic. Now in his senior years, he was keeping power by playing his devilishly handsome sons, Jorge and Luis Garcia, against one another in a high-stakes game of scenery chewing. All this was going on through Ignacio's mind when, during a meeting, the show's producer mentioned the idea. "We want you to die on the show," the producer continued. "Not just die, but really die. I know what you're thinking, but hear me out." And Ignacio did. In exchange for Ignacio's live on-screen death, the producer was going to pay more money than he had paid in the last 20 years. Thinking of his family, Ignacio agreed. The scene, once written, was somber. Ignacio would be in a hospital bed, his sons kneeling on either side. And as he took his final breath, their hands would meet across his dying body, symbolically ending their troubled feud. Power would be shared, family would prevail over politics. The show's viewers would join in a now genuine mourning, and afterwards, there would be a half-hour live tribute to the departed. On the day of the filming, after everyone had said their goodbyes, Ignacio gave a wonderful performance, culminating in his hospital bed scene. A real nurse hooked up a fake IV through which the real killing drug would be administered. And as he said his final lines and closed his eyes, Ignacio prepared to die. But instead of feeling arms meeting in truce, Ignacio heard shouting, Jorge! Jorge and Luis Garcia are arguing! First about dictatorship, then brotherhood, and finally childhood. Dulled by whatever had been pumped into his veins, Ignacio was unable to speak. He barely sat up in bed before Jorge's fist cracked his cheek. Luis Garcia turned on him too, jerking him up by his hospital gown, and the two brothers performed a hateful dialogue as they took turns pummeling him. They knocked him out of the bed and beat him mercilessly. The face, the producer instructed. And the actors obliged, taking turns on Ignacio's face until it was but a bloody quagmire with teeth. Now! Sputtering meekly on the floor, Ignacio could only watch as they picked up a heavy piece of machinery, no doubt bought for this very purpose, and smashed it against his head. Once, twice, 3 times, fragmenting it as audibly as a hollowed-out melon. The music swelled, the credits rolled, blood pooled, followed by a message. What you saw today was real. Welcome to the future of television. For more information, visit URL removed or support us on Kickstarter. Be part of the entertainment revolution. Pacienta, episode 7567, in memory of Don Ignacio Rojas. And cut. A low hiss reached the girl's ears. Her eyes flew open, and she sat upright. Swinging off the bed, she moved to the door and opened it. Bare feet against the cool floor, she tiptoed out her room and down the dark hallway. Mom! Dad! She whispered, but there was no answer. She trudged down the creaky wooden stairs as softly as she could. Upon stepping foot on the marble floor, she walked to the kitchen, her heart beating fast in her chest. She reached for a kitchen knife and grasped it tightly in her hand. The girl's breaths were quick and erratic, betraying her fright. Deftly flipping the light switch, the girl stood there in horror as she saw her parents' bloody corpses lying lifeless on the sofa. And then she saw it. The creature stood on all fours, roughly humanoid, with blue-gray skin, facing away from her. In the dark, it was almost invisible. The thing turned, revealing a gaping maw in place of a face, containing rows of sharp teeth, and it was very hungry. The girl turned and ran up the stairs as the monster gave chase. It took its time, knowing its prey could not escape. She reached her bedroom and slammed the door shut, panting from exertion. Sweat was trickling down her face. She pulled out her phone and tapped out her passcode hurriedly, desperately pressing a green square on the screen. She typed in 999. Call for help. It was unlikely someone could save her now. The door behind her shuddered. She screamed in fright. Another crash, and it gave way. She turned as the creature lunged toward her and bit into her flesh. She stabbed the knife into the creature's chest, but it didn't even flinch. She wailed as the piercing pain ripped through her body. Agony and suffering raced through her nerves and into her mind. The creature savored these sensations as it bit into her again and again. And then she saw and heard nothing. The creature knew she was dead, but it was still hungry. And so, blind and deaf, once more, the creature made its way out of the house in search of more meat.